Hey everyone, you're watching The Big Flush. I'm Zachary Marantet. I'm sitting here with John Enoch, and we're here to talk politics. It's Thursday, August 15, 2019. John, how are you doing today?
I am doing really good, Zach. It's a wonderful Thursday afternoon. A lot going on in the world, huh?
Oh, it's a constant reservoir of crazy activity, both wonderful and frightful. You know, especially for you, John, because you come from the state of Michigan, where they just had the Democratic debates not too long ago. We talked about that on previous episodes. But you've also got you have one Michigan congresswoman on the Democratic side and one Minnesota congresswoman, Omar, and remind me the Michigan lady's name?
Her name is Rashida Tlaib.
Right, and they got denied entry into Israel yesterday or today. And I think it was yesterday, and they got back today for their statements that support Palestinians and were interpreted by certain Israeli groups as being anti-Semitic. Where do you stand on that, John?
Well, one thing you don't want to do when you're in Congress is make Israel mad at you. That's not a good place to be. I don't know. I mean, I don't really care for either one of the ladies personally, and I don't like most of their politics. Whether or not what they said can be really construed as anti-Semitic, I don't know. It's a different culture. Israel's a different bird, and they kind of play by their own rules. So, you know, as a congressperson, you know you probably should be sensitive of that. But they could be in real trouble for those comments they made, because the thing is, which nobody ever wants to talk about, especially in Washington, is that the Israeli lobby is very, very powerful and well-funded and connected. And if you cross them, they will use their resources and their money and their vast, vast network to run somebody against you, to unseat you, to get someone in office that's much more favorable to Israel. And all you have to do is ask former Representative Cynthia McKinney about that. That's what happened to her.
She had an anti-Israeli agenda or campaign, and
no, it wasn't anti-agenda. What she did is she was much like them. She was a new congressperson that got elected. And when she started going through, the initial stages when they're getting you acclimated to be a congressperson, you go through orientation and whatnot. She was really puzzled because they passed around papers for everybody to sign, and it was a pledge. And it was a pledge basically that said you will always stand with Israel on every piece of legislation. You will denounce all that try to say bad things or attack Israel, and you will never vote against anything that's not in Israel's interests. And she said, why would I sign a pledge like this? I'm a U.S. congressperson. I'll pledge to, put America first. It's fine, you're our ally and everything, but I can't sign this pledge that says basically your interests are above America's interests at all costs. And she wouldn't sign it. And she got a lot of heat. And she was very outspoken because on the floor of Congress, she would call out some things that she thought were hypocrisies with our relationship with Israel. And she also called out or asked for reasons why we fund them in so many ways. And because of this continued thing with a couple other Congress people at the time, I forget if she was one term or two term, but she was out really quickly. The Israel lobby and a lot of their groups that they're affiliated with banded together and ran a candidate against her, and she was ousted, and that was the end of that. So I would imagine that the same fate is going to behold those two ladies.
Right. Well, I think it also has a, you know what, John, I feel like the one thing with the Israel issue is that it's one of the things that I'm the most torn on for several reasons. So for one, the population of Jews in the world compared to the population of Muslims in the world is breathtakingly disparate, you know. The idea that the Jews needed a homeland after the Holocaust is something that I'm very sympathetic towards, and having grown up in Europe, like, I don't know if it's possible to go through a day in real lived life in continental Europe without something, an image, a poster, a song, a TV show, something will remind you of the Holocaust. I found every single day when I was living in Central Europe where those terrible things happen. There's always something that causes it to rush through my mind every single day. At least when I lived there. There's a very deep consciousness about that. That I don't think is prolific in North America the way it is in continental Europe. So that's something that always weighs on my mind. Also, the sort of the principles, and I'm not talking about, I know there's been horrible things about how the Israeli, like the occupied Palestinian zone, how the Palestinians are treated. I'm not for that. But, and nobody in their right mind would be if they actually knew the reality of it. But the reality for me is also complicated in that I find that the values that Israel officially promotes, equal rights for gay people and women, open religion, secular constitution, those are the kind of things that, well, yeah, that's what makes America want to support, as they say, democracy in the Middle East. Which I think is a euphemism to be sure. I'm not really sold either way on the issue, to be honest with you, John. But there's also this thing going on between deep state Dems and freshman Dems. So the deep state Dems, like the Nancy Pelosi's, would be a lot more hush-hush about committing themselves to something like that. The more freshman novice Dems like Ocasio-Cortez and the ladies that we were just mentioning, they would be less likely to understand the consequences of saying that.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
Particularly if you're the kind of person on the left who likes to throw around the word racist or Islamophobe, which is exactly what they did when Donald Trump had a problem with them. You know, it's all about Islamophobia, but you don't see the right wing, the Israel-supporting right wing, throwing those kind of accusations at the left, even though it would be easy to do. I'm not saying they are anti-Semitic, John, but it would be easy to do if the right was into race baiting the way the left has reduced itself into being nowadays. You know.
Sure.
Also, the other thing with America's support of Israel, I remember reading a lot of Christopher Hitchens' work. We talk about him frequently here.
Yeah.
Christopher Hitchens talked about how the Christian right wanted to support Israel. This is during the Bush administration. The motivation mainly was because in the book of Revelations, the Messiah cannot come back to save the world in, the book of Revelations until Israel is restored. Right?
Yeah.
So that was always another negative thing about Israel that I never liked, or at least America's support of it. But I think the bottom line would be that even though I sort of support Israel insofar that their values are similar to mine nationally, or what they officially are, except for what's going on in those occupied zones. I also think that there's also complexities to it, and I don't think that a two-state solution is going to be possible. I don't know about you.
No, there's no such thing as a two-state solution over there, and that's one of the most disingenuous things I think about the politicians when they talk about the issues over there, and they've been doing it for decades. I was of sound mind and old enough to remember Menachem Begin and Jimmy Carter and the Egypt peace with Israel over there, and the Palestinian people have a certain mindset that is completely different than the Israeli people, and they've been fighting each other for thousands and thousands of years. So, I mean, it's nothing new, historically. But, when Israel came out of World War II and, got that territory and started, rebuilding itself and rebuilding the Jewish state, the Israeli people were very, very careful to, isolate and make sure the rest of the world helped them isolate the Palestinians. And at the time, I think probably for good reason, because, there was, in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of terrorism over there, a lot of terrorism. And it was, mostly Muslim, Arabic, Palestinian terrorism directed at Israel. I remember car bombs and restaurant bombs and things going off, over there. You'd see it in the news here. So that breeded quite a, animosity and hatred among Israelis for, the Palestinians. And then you fast forward through the, 80s, 90s, and 2000s to current day, there kind of has been, I don't want to say an ethnic cleansing, that might be too strong of a word, but there has been a systematic removal of Palestinians from Israeli society. The occupied territories and the developments in the West Bank. There used to be Palestinians that owned houses there and businesses, and the Israelis over time would just come in and, soldiers would come to one of their doors and say, hey, it's time to get out, you got to go, and then they'd...
Yeah, this is what I was telling you about when I said I'm not for how the nature by which Israel is handling the situation in many ways.
Yeah.
With regard to human rights.
Yeah.
And it's under discussed.
Oh, yeah, big time. And it's not only under discussed, like I said, the conversation isn't honest. The truth of the matter is there's been so much development of housing, of businesses, of infrastructure, of industry, that the land and other things that they would need to have a two-state solution don't even exist anymore and aren't going to be going back into place. So there's never going to be a two-state peaceful solution in that area of the world. It's just not going to happen. There's a really, really good micro documentary series that independent journalist Abby Martin did. And she used to be on RT at a show called Breaking the Set. And she now has a podcast and a website called Media Roots Radio. And she went over with a small crew to Israel last year or the year before and embedded herself in the occupied territory behind the wall with the Palestinians for about 30 days. And she has a 3 or 4-part series you can see on YouTube that just shows what it's really like over there, and it's really eye-opening. And the one thing I find that the U.S. government and other governments in the world, I was going to say suffer from, but it's not really suffering because they willfully do it, is they pick and choose who, gets the sympathy for humanitarian, aid or humanitarian relief or talk of, humanitarian things, because there's many parts of the world where atrocities are happening. They're happening in parts of Africa. They're happening, obviously, in Israel and with the Palestinians. It's happening in the Middle East countries, especially since the U.S. went over there and basically annihilated everything. There's all kinds of humanitarian crises around the world. I mean, Haiti, which is very close to us. And it's like for political reasons or economic reasons, they will help one country with their plate to, occupy somebody or exterminate somebody or whatever, and then the other one they'll call foul and say, no, that's terrible, we got to help these people. It's all based on money and politics and big business and big government. It's not it's not ever for humanitarian reasons.
Well, I also think it's about ideology. How many times have we talked about third wave feminists here in North America, but also in England? I find it's a problem of the Anglosphere. Again, I don't really understand why a language would make certain phenomenon happen more often than in countries that have a different language. Do you know what I mean? So why is underage drinking a problem in Australia, America, Canada, Britain, New Zealand, and English-speaking countries, but why in Germany can like a 15-year-old have a beer at the Oktoberfest with his family and it's not problematic? It's just in English-speaking cultures. And it doesn't matter that the countries are different too.
Sure.
And there's different races, ethnicities, faiths within those countries, but they still have a collective consciousness that is shaped by language in some fascinating way.
Yeah.
I admit that I don't read Noam Chomsky as much as I should, but this is one of the things that reminds me of that, I would say. However, in English-speaking cultures where we have third-wave feminism, with regard to what you were talking about, as in the why do we reserve sympathy for these people and not those people, and then throw all of our anxieties and hatreds on one group that probably has many victims in it as well? And I talk about third-wave feminism and how they will defend the wearing of a burqa and have nothing to say about, you know, stoning of adulteresses to death in certain countries, but they worry about Donald Trump grabbing a woman's crotch who is in an industry that she kind of knows what she's in for, and she goes anyway. She didn't want to go to university and get a degree and become an engineer or a nurse or a doctor or anything. She wanted to do that, and she knew what was going to happen, and in a way she invites it. And I'm not saying she wanted it, because we're not talking about a rape victim. We're talking about a woman who wants to be around rich men and get apartments, jewelry, fancy dinners, and so on.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate sugar daddy.
Right. Well, not just him, but I mean, there's richer people than Donald Trump.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, and I have nothing against those women wanting to do that, but women who don't want to do that and complain about Trump, they don't understand that their pride as a feminist is not held by those women, and they're not. This isn't a totalitarian society where you can force those women to be on board with whatever you're on board with. Yeah. Even though actually I probably would trust and have a better time with the reasonable, more upstanding women. Do you know what I mean?
Sure, sure. But I mean, you raise a good point, because this illustrates how, you know, people are full of shit. I mean, they really are. They're very hypocritical. I mean, because you're right, on one hand, you know, that they're very, very, you know, sympathetic to one side, but then, you know, something totally deplorable is happening on the other side, and that's okay, but it's really the same thing. And, you know, we do it in the U.S. I mean, prime example is, you know, inside here, you know, we have homeless people on the streets. We have veterans that, you know, are committing suicide at record numbers. Right. Or having hardships, unbelievable hardships. And
inner city police officers too. I have a friend who's a psychologist that just came back from a conference talking about the rate of suicide in New York for police officers in Los Angeles. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's all right. I mean, but so you have all these people inside our country that, you know, are facing, you know, financial hardship, mental hardship, you know, all kinds of things, and the country is almost like turned a deaf and blind ear to them and rallied, or at least half of the country, are rallying towards, you know, the immigration issue. And, you know, that's fine to care about the plight of other human beings. I mean, I go down to Mexico quite frequently. I've never had anything but a wonderful time. The Mexican people are beautiful people.
And there's a lot of them who want to come to the country and
Yeah.
by due process.
Yeah, there are, and
They're frustrated when
and there's
they
a
see...
lot of them that don't want to come here because they have a really nice life there. I mean, the whole country is not like, as Donald Trump kind of said, inadvertently, as a shithole. Mexico is a beautiful country, but the big gorilla in the room in Mexico are all the drug cartels.
Right.
If the drug cartels were eliminated and run out of Mexico, then I think Mexico could recover and the people could have a beautiful life and a prosperous one, and they wouldn't need to leave their country. But getting back to what I was saying, as much as you want to have a sympathetic heart to those people or anyone around the world that's going through some type of horrible thing, why is it that you become numb or apathetic or turn a blind eye into what's going on here? Because people, they donate their time, they donate their money, they go out and volunteer, they organize. I mean, there's groups that have organized, and their whole plight is to help these illegals get into the country some way and skirt the law and whatnot. And it's like they're taking all this time and energy to help these people. Why don't they take half of that and volunteer to help a veterans organization, or volunteer to go out with their group and go to a place like Los Angeles and see how they can maybe raise some money for the people that are living in tents, or help clean the place up, or and what's even sadder, and I was going to say sick, but to me it's more sadder. There are people that belong to like animal rights groups and pet rescues and whatnot.
Okay.
That they put so much energy into saving pets, which is fine. I love pets. I've had pets. There's nothing wrong with a doggy or a cat. I don't want to see a dog on the street loose, or a cat without a home, or whatnot. But to be so passionate about saving animals and putting time and money into that, I mean, it's fine, but there's people starving in this country. There's homeless people on the streets living in deplorable conditions, and sooner or later it's going to spread to the city that you live in.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know if I can be taken that far, John. I think that compassion, I think that people have different causes. I think that those people who, for example, I watch a lot of nature documentaries, and some of them are about sanctuaries for endangered species that, they can't be integrated into the wild because they were kept in captivity. So they need to create, like there's a place called Monkey World in Dorset, England, and they have, chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans. I'm not sure if they have gorillas, but it's all primates that live there. And many of them, I think, are endangered, actually. I don't think that those people don't care about the human beings that are hungry in the world. I just think that they know that there are other people who will take care of that, and that's not their strong suit. I also think there's people who just get on better with animals and work way better working with animals than they do with people. I often sometimes even count myself among people like that. I think there's different things. There's nothing insignificant about saving a species from extinction.
No, I'm not saying that. I mean,
I know
would
you're not
agree
saying there's
there,
anything
but,
wrong with it. Yeah.
I don't know. It just strikes me funny. I was when I was gone last month down in Florida. Me and my kid brother went to a barbecue restaurant, and when we walked in, there was about 20 ladies, like my mom's age, like moms and grandmas, that had all these T-shirts on, matching T-shirts, and they were setting up in the lobby, and they were doing I guess like a fundraiser for the doggy rescue. They have like a doggy rescue in this little town, and I don't know, the ladies were really nice, and they're like, all you gotta do is sign here, when your bill comes, and just give them this little tag, and that's gonna show that, I think it's $1 or $2 from your bill, the restaurant's going to donate to the animal charity and you don't have to pay anything. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. That's great. But I swear, man, it's like there's a Walmart across the street from this restaurant, and behind the Walmart, there must be 200 or 300 tents set up
Really?
with homeless people living in them. And it's just, you know, in Florida in the summertime, it's very hot and humid. There's a lot of bugs and mosquitoes. And, you know, the ladies were sweet and nice, and I really don't want to get on them for, you know, wanting to help animals and stuff. I just wish people would, you know, because you just said something that was kind of striking to me, is that, you know, some people get on with other things and they just think, well, they just know there's someone else out there that's going to do it.
Or that's better at doing it,
Or
at least.
better. But the problem is that everybody thinks that way. It's just like in America. Everybody, you know, less than 40% of people or thereabouts go vote. The other 50,
Right.
they don't,
Yeah, I
because they're just
understand.
like, you know what? The other people are going to go vote for Trump. Other people are going to go vote for Clinton. Nah, I'm too busy today. I don't need to go vote. And then, you know, so I don't know. I just wish humans would just be a little more conscientious about helping other humans.
Well, I think that one thing being, it makes it an interesting point of conversation, you being from the States and my coming from Canada, is that Canada, when we have homeless people here, it's more about mental illness. They have, it's not food stamps, you actually get a check from welfare here. And Canada is known as a welfare state. People who don't like welfare states use the term nanny state. And I go back and forth depending on the context or what they're trying to push. But in Canada, if somebody is homeless, it's not because nobody cares about them. Those people have every opportunity to have 3 hots and a cot. It's just that they don't accept it because they're mentally unwell. A lot of them are veterans, and it's not that they would rather, but I don't know what they're thinking, but they are spending the money not on food or on shelter like they're supposed to. But everyone has access to it in Canada. So that's, I guess, what I mean as a Canadian, saying other people will take care of that.
Okay.
You know, in America, you have a different concept. It's more you got to stand on your own feet.
Yeah.
The Democrats are really trying to change that right now. Bernie Sanders wants to have a more Canadian, Scandinavian approach to socialism. I don't think he's a full-on communist. But in America, the mentality is, oh, Bernie Sanders wants to take your money. And people in, like my father's age group who've reached this, you know, corporate success that he has, they think, well, why should I have to pay that? No one helped me. That's in my opinion, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because there are things about it that make a society strong. But I find that's the big difference between Canadian and American psychology.
There's totally a difference. I mean, you're right. In America, you know, you're kind of, some communities or states have better welfare than others. Some have very little, but, you know, America is a place where it's, you know, sink or swim.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one of the things that made the country so great. And it's one of the reasons that, you know, industries took off, because if you're really kind of nervous about where your next meal's coming from, then you don't let yourself starve. And I think, you know, in certain places in America where the welfare system has been, you know, very, very, you know, liberal or abused, you know, people get an incentive kind of not to have to go work or better themselves. And then it really, even though it's a free handout, it's barely enough to survive on, and it doesn't make your quality of life better, and it makes you kind of lethargic and you know, you lose your motivation. Yeah, you exist.
You exist. You don't live, but you exist.
Yeah,
You're there.
you get conditioned to live at a lower means than, you know, you could, because I do believe in the American way and capitalism. I mean, you know, the bad thing in America is with the government intervention and everything, we really don't have a capitalist system in America. I mean, they always say, oh, America's a capitalist place. Technically, yeah, but not really. Not in
How
theory.
is it less capitalistic than Canada, though?
Well, it's not. I don't think it's less capitalistic than Canada, but we have a mixed system, because in a true capitalist system, you know, the market dictates everything. And, when you read books like George Orwell's Animal Farm, or, you have pundits that talk about how, the oligarchs and monopolists are taking over, that's what happens when the government, basically turns its back on the capitalist system and cheats. It's like cheating. So, in a capitalist system, if you have somebody that strikes oil and they're charging an exuberant amount of money for it, and then somebody else strikes oil somewhere else and they undercut him, now he's got to come down in price, and if there's a third guy and a fourth guy and so on and so on. But what's happened in America over the last 100 years is that when the first or second guy strikes oil, they collude and they use their resources to go to the government, and they buy Congress people through donations and other nefarious things. And then the congressmen, they pass a law that, or they pass regulations through one of the agencies that doesn't even have to go through our Congress. And those things are like, okay, well, you can't drill for oil unless you get a permit from the government. Permit from the government costs $100 million. You can only refine it this way. You can't have a refinery here. You can't be within, a certain distance of someone else. And so they put in all these little things that no other person could possibly do. On a small scale, you could use the example of what's going on in Michigan now with the legalization of marijuana. Marijuana was legalized about a year or so ago. Maybe a little longer, but for recreational.
I still don't know where to buy weed in Michigan, though.
Oh, there's dispensaries all over the place. But the thing is that what they did is they made it legal for use, but then they said, as far as, being able to sell it and be a dispensary or do it as a business.
Well, of course not.
The regulations are still out. We're still writing the regulations. And the first draft of the regulations said that if you want to be a dispensary, a business that sells the strains, well, you have to buy a license from the state, which is, I believe it's somewhere around $25,000. There's all kinds of zoning requirements, so you can't be within so many, feet or miles of a school, of a hospital, of all these different things. And then, on top of that, you have to place a cash bond with the state in the amount of $500,000. It can't be, it has to be a cash bond. You literally have to have $500,000 and give it to the state for the state to hold, basically, in case you do something nefarious or whatever. So what that does is that's the government's way of handing that industry to big pharma or big business, because you and I and, our three other buddies that maybe wanted to start a dispensary, we can't come up with $500,000 on top of another $25,000 for the license, on top of, putting money down for a lease of a building, buying all the equipment, the lighting, getting the plants going, hiring people. So now for us to actually open a small dispensary, we're looking at a couple $1 million minimum.
Right.
Whereas if those regulations weren't there, we could probably rent a small little warehouse space and start growing plants, because they're plants.
Right, but you can't sell moonshine. That's regulated too.
It is regulated, but I mean, you can at least get in. Like if you, in Michigan, for instance, you actually can sell moonshine. Oh. You can go, and it's actually, for wine or liquor, it's the same thing. I know because I make wine, and a few years ago, me and a friend were going to do some wine stuff, and we went and we applied. The license to be able to make and sell liquor or wine in the state, if it's homemade or small batch, is $150. That's so. You're right.
That's just to make it.
No, to make it and sell it. So,
okay.
So if you and I wanted to open up a boutique distillery, the license to open it is $150. That's the license to the state. Whereas if you want to do a cannabis dispensary, the license is $25,000. The bond is $500,000. So, so why why the inequity if both of the products are similar as far as being banned? So what that is that's interfering with capitalism.
Right.
So it's a mixed system where it means that we wouldn't have all these oligarchs and these monopoly people. We wouldn't have big entities growing and growing like Jeff Bezos and Amazon if there weren't protections in place. You know, same thing with the military. I mean, yeah, you need a certain technical expertise to be able to design military equipment and a certain level of government clearance, but there's literally like 2 or 3 military contractors, and that's it. And there can't be competition, and that's why, you know, it was back in the late 80s or 90s, it was a big scandal because I think it was 60 Minutes found out that the government was paying like $500 or $600 for a hammer, like $4,000 or $5,000 a piece for porcelain toilets. They were just raping.
For what?
That's what the contractors were billing the government.
Oh.
So if, you know, the crew there needs hammers, oh, don't bring your own hammers, guys. We have to buy them. And then we have the hammer company, and we sell the hammers to the government. A $5 hammer for $800 times how many hundreds or thousands of hammers we need. Same thing with boxes of nails. Same things. Well, the toilets. A toilet is about $80 to $150, yet we're selling them to the government for like $4,000 a piece. So when there's no competition, you know, government entities get raped, the consumers get raped. You know, it's just bad. So,
well, one of the that is interesting. I didn't know that about Michigan's laws with you know, making your own alcohol and distributing it, and the price difference between doing that and selling cannabis, growing and selling cannabis. Canada has similar problems, not the same, just similar. We have the LCBO in Ontario, the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. It's the only place you can buy hard liquor. You can there's places where you can, you know, make your own wine. There's places, you know what I mean, where you buy it, you don't actually make it, you order it there, and this independent person will make it for you. But I don't know what their licensing fees are to do that. But for marijuana, and I think I've talked about this before, I was in Vegas a couple months ago. Actually, it was probably in the end of February, early March. That was when I interviewed Mr. Peter Klamka of the Moore nightclub chain in Las Vegas and LA. He, well, I found out when I arrived there that weed was legal in Nevada. So I'm like, okay, I, you know, wanted to find out about it. The difference was crazy. I thought, oh, it's not even going to be as developed as it is in Canada, because people know the Netherlands and Canada when it comes to the subject of weed, you know, and sometimes because of Bob Marley, Jamaica, but it's illegal in Jamaica, full on illegal, officially. But over here in the city I live in, there's no dispensaries, even though it's legal.
really?
Right. So there's the way people legally can, the only way people can buy marijuana in this city is on the Ontario Cannabis Store, ocs.ca. And it's quite expensive. I'm not going to lie, the stuff is pretty good compared to the street stuff before it came legal. I think the main benefit in it being legal now is the hygiene of the product.
So it would be Cheech and Chong approved? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, for sure. I think that should be a stamp, actually. Yeah, Cheech and Chong approved. There's another way that people can make money. But what I like about Vegas is the fact that it's not government controlled. Or it doesn't appear to be government controlled the way it is here. There's multiple dispensaries all condensed in one place. And like, you know, you were talking about American capitalism and the competition keeping, well, they didn't keep prices competitive, but it's more that, I mean, you show up, you show them your ID, there's like a red carpet, there's all, you know, these good looking people with good, nice clothes on telling you, okay, go and see Daphne over there. And then you say, and then by the time you meet her, she's already been told in the walkie, what your name is. And she goes, oh, hi, John, right this way. Would you like the express line or would you like the long line with the tour? And it's all very, you know, clandestine, immaculate, and professional, and so different than here in Canada where it's just the website, and not every city gets to have dispensaries because there was a lottery for each province on which cities would be allowed to have dispensaries, and the mayor of this city is not particularly keen on it for some reason, even though I think it would do wonder for the business, for the business perspective.
Yeah.
We here in this city, it's interesting, like Bernie Sanders just came over to Windsor from, as you know, we talked about it, to talk about insulin, and I think that he's dead on about the craziness and how the pharmaceutical industry is the only thing that doesn't have to have competitive pricing.
Well, yeah,
You
and
know?
I mean, and that's another good example of how America is not a capitalist country, because, you know, they can get a patent for their medicine, and then they can re-up the patent, and there's no, I mean, I get it, you know, one of the things about capitalism is there's no price controls. But, you know, the government prevents who else can make drugs. So it's very hard to be a competitor. I mean, you can be a chemist, you can know how to make it, but to get the licenses from the government are extremely expensive. And then I believe the average cost to get a drug approved through the FDA process from start to finish. Now, this isn't the research and development, so that's money, your own dime. But when you actually have the drug ready for testing, to get it from start to finish through the FDA, it's about $2 million per, you know, drug. So, again, if you and I went to, you know, college and we're both chemists and we create, you know, a drug that's great for migraine headaches or that is good for blood pressure.
Yeah.
It is so cost prohibitive for us to be able to get into the market that it's like an inadvertent way that they stifle capitalism and competition.
Right.
Because what ends up happening usually is, because we're probably a little bit in debt from developing the drug, you know, one of the big, you know, drug pharma companies, you know, we end up just approaching them and say, hey, we got this. You want to buy it from us? Yeah, here, guys, here's $200 million, and they'll go away.
Right.
And they get it, and now they have their hot little hands on it. And something that, you know, costs pennies to make, you know, they're going to sell for $200, $300, $400 a pill, depending on, you know, what the medication is for. So, so again, it's, you know, the people on the left, you know, the far, far left, the progressive left, that are railing about we need socialism and capitalism is demonic and evil. I think they're just, I hate to use the word ignorant because it sounds like a disparaging term, but it's not. Ignorant just means you don't have all the facts. You're kind of clueless about something. And I think they're really clueless because instead of trying to bring in a whole new system, which has been proven not to work time and time again all over the rest of the world, all throughout history, they should instead turn their efforts on the government and big industry and be like, we want real capitalism. We don't want this crony capitalism, because that's why, you know, these bad things are happening, that they're all up in arms about it. And I can't blame them. I mean, God forbid neither one of us gets sick. I mean, you're probably in a better position than I am being in Canada. But the difference in medication is huge. I know when I was down in Mexico last time, I was down there working, and everybody that I was down there with, I went with a group of friends. One of the last things these people do, my friends, who they've been going down there for 30-some-odd years, or older people that I go with, the last thing they do before they come home is they go to the little drugstore pharmacy, which is everywhere in Mexico.
Right.
They got as many of them as 7-Eleven, and they're not huge like drugstores. They're these little, you know, storefronts, and you can go in and get a Z-Pack, and that's what they'll do. They'll stock up on Z-Packs. They'll stock up on a little better painkillers. They'll stock up on other prescription medicines they need to take, and then they usually sneak it back in their luggage, and, you know.
Well, that's what was happening when Bernie was here. The group he came with were all senior citizens, and they came to Canada to buy insulin. at like an eighth of the cost or something like that. But what was interesting to me was when Fox News reported it, Steve Doocy on Fox News, who, and I think that Fox News would have nothing but a negative agenda to talk about Bernie Sanders. Even if he said the sky is blue, they would have to disagree with it. But they were all saying that all these elderly Fox, not only elderly, there were a few people on Peter Doocy's outfit that had insulin or had diabetes and they needed insulin, and it's like, oh yeah, we're in Canada. Every time I'm in Canada, I make sure I stock up on my insulin.
Yeah,
you know, and it's legal, but in this case, it's legal. They don't need to sneak it back. So there's no regulation, I guess, from the Canadian side. But that's one of the things they were talking about. But the reason I brought it up is the comparison, which is not between Windsor and Detroit, which is not, or this part of Ontario, Canada, and you know, the United States. The contrast is it's Bernie Sanders is not the first person to comment on it. If you remember Michael Moore's movie Bowling for Columbine, I don't know if you saw that movie, John.
No,
2002, I think it was.
I don't go see Michael Moore movies. They give me hives.
No, you got to watch something you disagree with, though. I know you wouldn't like this movie at all, but
no, I actually, when Michael Moore first came out, I was a fan, and I was. Wow.
I'm pretty sure he's an NRA member. He's okay with sporting firearms.
Michael Moore isn't okay with anything that the right wants to do, no matter what he says. He's, it's been so long now I couldn't tell you the name of the movie. But
what was the Fahrenheit 9/11?
Yeah,
Sicko?
Yeah, something.
Capitalism, a love story.
And then there was a movie that came out basically showing where Michael Moore had like taken people's like statements and stuff and cut up the video and put it back together out of context.
That is something that even people on the left have commented on.
Yeah, so the minute you do something like that, it's no matter, it's no longer a factual documentary. It's a propaganda bullshit movie.
But I think
Might
they
as
all
well be
are.
fiction.
I don't think there's any documentary that is not like that. The only way to have it not like that would be to have the documentary be one single continuous shot with no editing, like Alexander Sokorov's Russian Ark.
You have to edit a movie, but I mean, if I say...
Not always. There's a few single shot movies.
There are, but I mean, most of the time, I mean, you have different scenes in a documentary, you interview different people, but, you know, if you say, you know, I really killed it yesterday when I went to the store and da-da-da-da, and they just change it to, I really killed yesterday. I mean, it's big, you change the whole thing.
Right.
And it's, again, if you sell it as entertainment, that's one thing, but if you're selling it as a factual documentary like Michael Moore was doing, after that I was like, I'm not going to see another one of these guys' movies. He's full of shit just like everybody else.
Well, what he did, I don't know that he's ever cut up a person's sentences and made it look like, I am kill you, you know.
Well, he's cut up video footage, and what he's done is he's taken video footage from different times and different places and put that together like it's one running piece. So
the one in Bowling for Columbine, if I recall, he goes to a bank. The first scene, he goes to a bank and he opens an account, and it's every time I think it might even be in Michigan. And he said, after you open the account, they give you a free gun, like a free shotgun. Okay. And so he opened the account, they showed it in the film, and then, but what happened was he got the gun, they gave it to him at a different place. So he met them at like a gun store, and they bought him a gun, and he said, okay, but I want to continue filming in the bank. And he took the gun, and he cocked it, and then he said, hey, don't you think it's a little bit stupid handing out guns in a bank? And then drum roll and the movie started.
Come on,
they didn't actually give him a loaded gun in a bank.
But he made it look like they did. See, he's full of shit. I got no respect for Michael Moore.
I wouldn't say that. I've heard a lot of things about him when he goes to film festivals and when he goes to events. He makes sure that there's like a community outreach. The money that gets generated from all the ticket sales is going to go to other people. I don't hate Michael Moore at all.
I don't hate him, but I mean, if you're a filmmaker and you sell yourself as a documentary filmmaker, which gives the average Joe, not the average entertainment insider, but the average Joe on the street, the impression that they're about to go into a theater and see something factual, and it's not factual, it's fiction, then you don't sell yourself as a documentary maker. You sell yourself as a fiction movie maker.
Right. And so one of the reason I brought him up was because he, like Bernie Sanders, they came to Windsor, they went to Detroit, and they, for several movies, he did it once for the movie Bowling for Columbine. He did it another time for the movie Capitalism, A Love Story, because he has an aunt and uncle who live here in Windsor, because he's only from Flint. Like, he comes to Windsor a lot, I'm sure.
Probably.
And he was interviewing his aunt and uncle, and they went to the bank here in Canada to buy some kind of special health insurance for going abroad.
At a bank?
Yeah, I don't know. It looked like they were in a bank. I don't know why they were there. Where else they would get that, I'm not sure, because I've never bought that. I go to the States all the time and don't buy health insurance. But these elderly people did, and he was trying to make it look like all old people who are Canadian, when they go to the States, they would never go without insurance. And that's like Americans should wake up and that kind
Like
of thing.
what? It's like flight insurance? Like you come across the border, if something bad happens to you, you're covered?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, basically when you come back, because your injuries were not inflicted in Canada, it allows you to to be covered by the Canadian healthcare or something like that.
Wow.
But yeah, it's really interesting how people try to manipulate it. They came here and they said, you know, Windsor's so much better, and you know, at that time it was definitely safer. There's no denying that than Detroit is. Detroit's changed and come around a long way.
Oh yeah.
But the point is, I think most Canadians, when they go to the States, they like the capitalism. They like the commodities they can buy. They like the fact that if they go to an event, like a sporting event, and holy shit, the public parking is all full, and there's VIP parking, but I don't have a VIP ticket. But wait a minute, if I give the guard, you know, a 50,
Yeah.
he's going to let me park there. That won't happen in Canada. Maybe in Toronto, maybe in the three big, like, important Canadian cities, Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, it'd be different, because the people there, they go through money and they'll be like, whatever, guy's giving me a 50, good. In the rest of Canada, where it's a little bit more nanny state-y, that's where people don't have that hunger, that brutal incentive to just, okay, there's tons of spaces and you're giving me $50, go ahead, buddy. You know.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that a lot of people like about the States, and there's just more going on. The other main thing with capitalism and the hunger that it creates, and a positive hunger. I'm not talking about people who are just going to be a lapdog because they're being exploited by some horrible system. But I like, New York, when I arrived there, by the time I took the subway from the airport from JFK to Brooklyn, where I was staying. And by the time I got to Brooklyn, I had a handful of business cards from people my age, and they said, give me a call, because they heard I was I'm Canadian, but I was flying in from Europe. And people are just more excited about business. They're more spontaneous, more entrepreneurial.
Sure.
Toronto has an element of that, but it's still very, it's very reserved, I find.
Yeah.
Torontonians.
No, people, I mean, that's the thing. Again, I'm throw around the word ignorant. I mean, a lot of Americans, I think, sadly, maybe the majority of Americans are really ignorant to the rest of the world, and the way the rest of the world is. They don't realize what they have at their fingertips if they just decided to use it or dig deep. Because, I mean, like living in Europe, when I traveled to Europe, I mean, I have friends that over there. I mean, I have a real good friend that wanted to start a small website development business. They wanted to, design websites for people. And they live in Athens, Greece. And to start the business there, again, they have to put a $15,000 bond with the government, which is if you do something bad, the government's got money to come in and punish you and clean up the mess with your money. And then, again, licensing and everything. And in most of the European countries, you just can't do like you can in America. In America, you can literally sit down at your computer and you can go right to the government website for, $20, $30. You can get register a business name. you get a tax ID number, you know, you're in business. You in papers, articles of incorporation, which you can do yourself online, walks you right through the thing. You know, 5 minutes later, and for less than $100, you've got a legal business. You can't do that in almost anywhere else in the world. I mean, very few places.
Yeah.
So
Oddly enough, I find it's actually easiest to do business in Eastern Europe because the experience of communism has caused them to go the completely opposite direction. That's one of the things I like about being there is the entrepreneurial spirit is very, you can almost say American. Like New York American, not like Kansas American. Nothing against Kansas or anything.
But see, the average American has been brainwashed to think that, you know, there are no elements of that over there until you get to like Sweden, you know, where there's democratic socialism, but that's not really true either.
Yeah. Well, that's what Candace Owens likes to talk about, overprivileged Americans. You know, she was talking about Black Lives Matter and police brutality and how these kind of conversations would never happen in other countries, you know, because it's an entitlement complex. You know, same thing with the, there was that one guy, the Democratic candidate who is talking about like keeping people surviving with money for the future when there's going to be no more work.
Oh,
What
yeah,
was his
Andrew
name?
Yang.
Yeah, him. He, you know, has interesting points, but there's people who go even more extreme, and it's just like, well, if people don't want to work, you know, it should become a thing of the past that people have to work. That's, you know what I mean?
Well,
there's a term for that. It's like a 3-word term, like
I know a 1-word term for it.
Yeah.
Lazy. Lazy. And Candace Owens is right, you know, so anybody that thinks that way, come on now.
Yeah.
I mean, they forget the history of the country. I mean, the history of this country is, you know, we came over here and you literally had land. You built your own house, a log cabin, whatever you had. You farmed your own vegetables and food. You grew your own cows and goats and whatever, you know, for milk, and you made your own cheese, you made your own butter. You were self-sufficient.
right.
The family unit, you know, they had a lot of kids back then, and sometimes you had multiple families living, you know, in close proximity, and they would all grow food together. That's how it used to be.
Yeah.
And it was like that probably until, the early 1900s.
Well, I think it was like that for everybody in the world before the Industrial Revolution.
Everybody. So this entitlement thing is definitely a new modern thing.
Well, it is. It's also sort of a communist thing, but it's a sort of neo-communist thing because I think it was Sargon of Akkad who was talking about how you'll hear a communist say something like, "Oh, I'm entitled to a free meal." No, you're not. You're entitled to the means to make your own meal.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Big difference.
So the way he explained it, and I think he was actually quoting somebody else. So this might be the third person. I might be the third person in the telephone game here with this one. But I like the way Sargon of Akkad explained it. He was saying, basically, to understand the concept of freedom, you have to imagine yourself alone on a beautiful tropical island with lots of fruit, lots of vegetation, lots of hogs and pigs and you know, like easygoing wildlife that you can kill, roast, and eat. Those things are not going to make themselves edible for you right away. You have to go out and plow the field. You have to cut down a tree and build a house. At nighttime, if it gets cold, you have to chop the wood and make the fire. And you can have whatever you want as long as you're willing to procure it for yourself and manage it.
Yeah.
But when you live in a society and there's people in different industries and infrastructures and businesses and things like that and services, real estate, restaurants, those kinds of things. You have the right to go and enjoy those things, but you need to pay for them because that's what keeps the economy going.
Yeah.
Those people need to eat too. There's a chain reaction of people who need to buy things and feed themselves.
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
know, and one of the interesting things, I'm not crazy about Margaret Thatcher, but one of the correct things she said was that socialism is awesome until the money runs out.
Sure.
Because
Well,
after the
yeah.
money runs out, the only incentive is the state putting a gun to your head,
Yeah.
and forcing you to work and be productive so that the society can sustain itself.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading the Wall Street Journal recently, and they were talking about how Putin, like, as people describe him as arrogant or cocky or whatever, but at the end of the day, he knows that the entire country of Russia barely has the economic strength of the city of New York.
Yeah.
You know, and he knows that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that's all interesting stuff. I think people just don't know where shit comes from.
No, they don't. I mean, and that's what I mean. I mean, America, I think, leads the way, you know, as far as being a first world country. It's also, you know, probably the most ignorant populace by percentage. I mean, again, and a lot of people don't have the means or wherewithal ever to travel outside of the country, so they don't ever get the, you know, perspective of being traveled. And, you know, it's one of the reasons that I really respect Tulsi Gabbard, who's running for, you know, president on the Democrat side, is, you know, all this propaganda coming from Syria, just like we heard, you know, through the 90s, all the propaganda about Iraq, you know, weapons of mass destruction. We hear propaganda in the news, constantly in the news cycle the last couple of years, all about Russia and how Russia is trying to undermine America. But then you're hearing about the evil Chinese. Then you're hearing about the evil Iranians. I mean, it's
North
Koreans. It's like everybody's evil everywhere. And how many people in this country, in America, or even in Canada, have actually been to any of those countries or all of those countries for more than just a weekend to actually talk to people, see how they live, you know? But they just watch this little square thing called a television or now a computer monitor or your phone, and they just see some talking heads tell them how it is over there.
Right.
And they just believe it.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, well, I also think that one of the things about living in a foreign country, I have friends that live in foreign countries. Well, I shouldn't call them friends, but people I know that continue to have stupid beliefs because by the time... See, I lived in Europe when I was 13, between 13 and 20, right? So that's a pretty odd time, a pretty important time in life, right?
Yeah.
But if I'd gone there when I was 20, my ideas would have largely been sculpted already, or at least a world view would have already taken shape. It would not have been still in the process of forming. I mean, it still is for me now in my late 20s. And I think most people, like intelligent people, which I like to try and consider myself, I hope to. I don't know. I'm not a know-it-all. I know there's a lot I don't know. But we all constantly are on this journey of learning more. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I like about what we try to do here.
Oh, absolutely.
In our discussions. But, yeah, you have to know, if you don't know the language, that's another thing about living in a country and not getting it. You can live there for 4 years, but if you hang out with only expats, or if the worst is for people who are in the military, you know, they are completely isolated, and they live in these like Stepford communities that were like raised and floated over the Atlantic Ocean to Europe and then fell down, and they're living there in another country. But it looks like Stepford.
Yeah.
Like somewhere in California.
No, wouldn't it be great? I think, you know, what it should be in order to graduate from high school, you should be, you know, you should have to take like a summer trip when you get out of school. You should have to go and at least go to like 3 or 4 or 5 different countries in the world, and the school should pay for it as much tax money as they get, which mysteriously doesn't go into books or anything else.
No, it doesn't. In Canada, Ontario's really bad for that.
Yeah.
At least when I was in elementary school, actually they pay elementary school teachers in Ontario. I think they're some of the most highly paid, like public school teachers in the world. Of course, private school teachers are a different situation because they're privately funded. But the public school teachers here make more money. And I remember duct tape textbooks. Yeah. Have to share them. They're all fucked up, pages missing, fuck you written on every other page.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
dicks,
no, it's terrible.
like drawn penises and shit.
Right.
And where's all that money going? You know, and now they've even added, because my friend is an elementary school teacher. She was telling me that the bar, like, there's no more failing now.
Oh,
so
right,
now
yeah.
there's a lot of morons going into ninth year in high school, because we don't have middle school here. But yeah, it's all very strange how that happens, and I think it would be a nice thing to see people sending kids abroad.
Yeah.
You know, but then again, you have to remember, when kids are on a school trip, they tend to stick with themselves.
Yeah.
You know, I have to say this, though. I find that about Americans, too, a little bit. It doesn't matter what their age is. I found that, and Canadians to a certain extent also, whereas they get to a European or, you know, some foreign destination, and their idea of a cultural exchange is, oh, you're from Minnesota? You know, I'm from Ohio. Let's hang out and have dinner tonight. You know what I mean? Like, these Italians, I don't know about them, you know.
I've seen it happen before.
I see it happen a lot, you
Yeah.
know, and sometimes it's tempting, you know. Like I'm happy to be with Americans abroad and meet different people. We're all tourists, but I think I'd prefer to meet the locals.
Yeah.
You know, even if we don't speak the same language, we can use, you know, sign language, mime. There's all kinds of ways to communicate people that don't require language. I have many friends like that abroad. But yeah, it is culturally enlightening. It raises the consciousness to another level to have spent a significant amount of time.
But see, now, I mean, before, I mean, I guess if you send your kids over to Europe, you have to be all nervous and scared, you know, for their safety and being careful and whatnot. But
it's safer there.
Yeah, now that Jeffrey Epstein is dead, I mean, now you can send your kids to Europe. You don't have to worry about them getting enslaved in some type of sex ring down in some Caribbean island somewhere.
So what happened? He would kidnap... by the way, it's interesting that this just happened with Epstein, because there were a few episodes ago, actually this happened a couple months ago, you brought him up.
I did.
And nobody was, I'd never heard of him before. Nobody was talking about him in the media yet. And you were talking about how Bill Clinton, but like, I mean, the guy Epstein spent 600 hours plus a year on that jet. Yeah. His private jet.
Yeah.
And there were all kinds of people who went on it, you were telling me about. Mainly like Bill Clinton. And I think Bill Clinton, because Donald Trump's untoward behavior is not a secret, I don't call him creepy. Because he's not creepy, because it's all out in the open.
Right.
You know, I'm not, you know, you just don't keep your teenage daughter around,
right,
you know, if she's hot or whatever.
You know the Donald's hot to try.
Yeah, so you know that, and I think he knows you know that, so there's just something that's not bothersome when it's out in the open. And it doesn't involve kids. That's the main thing with Trump. It doesn't involve children or underage people. And it doesn't involve anybody who is not sort of in the business of generating income because of how they look. Yeah. Like I said, like it's different if he were to grab like my mom's, you know, private area, that's different. He wouldn't do that to a woman like my mom. He would do that to a woman who's like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna get like a record deal, and you know, my name is Destiny, and this is my friend Safara, and yeah, we're gonna like be famous. You know, I don't have a problem with people like that, but I also don't. It's not like, oh my God, some rich guy grabbed her vagina. You know, like. It's like when
allegedly.
It's like in Godfather when Santino gets machine gunned to death, and the next thing you see is Don Corleone going, "How could this happen? How could this happen?" Well, you're in the fucking mafia. Your son kills people. You kill people. You're not gonna die of natural causes. Well, he did actually.
Allegedly.
But where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so the Epstein thing. He had all kinds of people on the plane. They've cited certain people who were on the plane that I don't think were involved with that, though. So I don't think Hillary Clinton herself is some kind of female sex perv.
Oh, you never know.
You never know, but she's from Queen, as far as I'm concerned.
I tell you what, I mean, I've been studying conspiracies now for the last 15 years, and before that, I never would have studied conspiracies. I could care less, and I just thought they were bullshit. But,
Okay.
I had a good friend of mine one time. We were having an argument over 9/11, and he brought up some things that sounded completely outlandish to me, and he challenged me. He pissed me off, actually, the way he was. And he challenged me to prove him wrong. He's like, well, if you think I'm such a whack job, it should be easy for you to prove me wrong. And it got so kind of heated that I spent I'm going to prove him wrong. So I read some books. I went on the internet. I started doing all this deep dive into certain things. And the more I dove, the more I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know this. And wow, I didn't know that. And wow, my buddy's right about that. And my God, that doesn't make sense. And that can't be true. I mean... And it just so, I read a book years and years ago that came out. It was called American Evita, and it was about Hillary Clinton. And this was way before she had any political aspirations to be the senator of New York. I mean, this was when she was still just a first lady, and it talked about, all the cover-ups in Arkansas, how people mysteriously died around them.
Yeah, I heard that.
Oh, there's so many, though. It's... that's the thing. If there's circumstantial evidence for, 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 different things over time, and you're in the political eye, and, at that. But, I mean, take our last governor of Michigan, or every governor we've had in Michigan. There's no, like stuff floating around them, happening, it's not like every governor of the state of Michigan has just had 9 people mysteriously die around their realm, and when you see things like that nature, you see other stories that have come out about places like Bohemian Grove and some of the weird ritual things they do. I know when I lived in Hollywood, California, long time ago. I was in the music business a little bit, and I got invited to a couple different parties. I got invited to a lot of parties, but I went to a couple different parties in the Hollywood Hills that freaked me the fuck out, some of the stuff I saw. Sexual, yeah, symbolic sexual bondage. I mean, just crazy things in these big mansions. And when the movie Eyes Wide Shut came out, with Tom Cruise.
Yeah, Stanley Kubrick's last film.
When that movie came out and I saw that movie, I was just, the whole movie, I was just like, holy shit, this is exactly what it was like on 2 different occasions. And these are very, 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 very wealthy people. And, people have sexual, twisted fantasies, fetishes, and desires.
And the richer they get, the more they're like, hey, I can actually fucking do this shit.
Yeah,
I can make this happen. I can pull that out of my head and into reality.
Yeah. How much, I want this girl. How about I give you 20 grand? No, how about 2 million? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they can.
They can. Okay, well, part of the deal is you got to let me tie you to this altar, and 20 other people are going to watch while I bang you. I mean... And then, we may or may not, stick you with, daggers and let you bleed out and bury you in a hole and you're never seen from again. I mean, just so much creepy shit. So...
Yeah, well, there's that new movie out, too, The Hunt.
Well, yeah, but they canceled it. They're not going to release it now.
What?
Yeah, it's been canceled. They're not going to release it.
Because there's some truth to it, or what?
You're talking about the one where the liberals go out and hunt the
well, I thought it was just I thought it was about rich people going after poor people.
No, I believe we're talking about the same film. The film that just is coming out that was going to be released is about people with liberal ideology. It's like a satire.
Okay.
And it's like liberal ideology going out and cleaning up and killing all the conservatives.
Globalist elitist gathers for the very first time at a remote manor house to hunt humans for sport, but the elite's master plan is about to be derailed because one of the hunted, Crystal, knows the hunter's game better than they do. She turns the tables on the killers, picking them off one by one as she makes her way toward the mysterious woman. Yeah.
Hillary
At the center of it all, yeah.
Oh.
And it's played by Hilary Swank. I like her a lot.
Oh, well, they got the first name right at least.
Yeah.
But I mean, so this thing with Epstein, man, they've known about Epstein for 20 plus years. And I mean, it's so common knowledge in those circles. Everybody knew who that guy was. Everybody knew, if they didn't know firsthand directly, they heard about it from people. Oh, God, this freaking crazy place we just went to, and da-da-da-da.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's had a history of having young girls around him for years and years. And you mean to tell me if we got a group of friends or business associates, like I sell real estate. So if I'm with a bunch of realtors at my office, 30, 40 different people, and we see Jerry, coming in, and he's always with somebody that looks like they're borderline, like somebody's 14-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
You don't think we're going to be like, what the fuck's going on with Jerry? The people know, and they partook in it. And there's a video out that they just somebody flew a drone over the island where his place was, and it's creepy. There's symbolism. There's domed buildings, and there's hieroglyph things in the tile work. Just bizarre ass shit. Same thing with his other mansion that he has in Florida. Just crazy stuff. And then you see these women that are coming out. I mean, they're naming very prominent business people, politicians, people you see on TV, and they know a good deal about them. They're coming up with not statistics, but they're coming up with facts or evidence that they could only know if they really were in this person's realm and around them. So, I mean, they've implemented the former governor, Bill Richardson, what's his name, the attorney on TV all the time.
Newt Gingrich?
No,
He's not.
Alan Dershowitz.
Oh, him, yeah.
Yeah, Alan Dershowitz, who was on the first legal team that got, what's his face? I'm drawing a blank here now. The guy, they just killed him. They just said he committed suicide.
Epstein.
Epstein,
who
yeah.
we were talking about. Yeah,
Epstein.
Okay.
And I couldn't pull his
I
name
gotcha.
out. Dershowitz was one of the attorneys that got Epstein off. He represented Epstein when Epstein got his sweetheart deal 10 years ago in New York. So they're all intertwined.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so
my only
rampant.
thing is, I heard a story about this. I think I read it on the internet. It's about, they were chronicling who was on some of these flights with Epstein. And I can't be taken that far to believe that every single person there went there to have sex with underage girls. Because on one of the flights, at the same time, it was Hillary Clinton, Chris Tucker, who just does not, you know who I'm talking about, the black comedian. He was in Rush Hour. Hard to see him being involved with stuff like that. I've never heard it. I've read that he's a devout Christian, which doesn't really mean anything, I guess. But I just don't. He doesn't strike me like that. And then there was Kevin Spacey, who's he's into underage people, but not girls. You know,
Well, who said it was just girls?
Well, he's come out as gay, and I've always, in my opinion, I didn't know he was into teenage boys, but I've always known he was homosexual.
I tell you what, man, unless you've had lunch with these people and you've hung out with them and spent time with them, you can't you can't believe their personality on TV. I mean, it's one of the things I did see when I was in the music business is you'd be around these famous performers with these personas, And the minute you off camera or backstage, they're completely. They resemble not even 1 ounce of what their public persona looks
no,
like.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you wouldn't think somebody like that. And the other thing is that makes it so much more sinister, where I think there really is a upper echelon cabal of like weird, demonic, freaky, however you want to say it, is that when you're worth as much money as these people have, when you have the kind of fame that they have, when you have the kind of, money or power or influence that they have, it wouldn't be hard for them to get somebody even just to have sex with for the night. You can't tell me that someone like a Chris Tucker, or even like a big businessman or a former president like Bill Clinton, or anybody, think of like Jamie Dimon from Chase Bank or whoever, some big wealthy, powerful, or famous person. You can't tell me that they can't go out somewhere and have some person of the opposite sex just so enamored that they're in their presence that if they flirt around, they're not going to get whatever they want, or they can't use their money or influence to get whatever they want. So,
no, I know that the people who want to do that will, but I don't think that everybody has that impulse just because they can. I don't think just because they're rich that they would do that.
No, I don't think just because they're rich they would do that.
But it's an option.
But
it's on the table.
Yeah, and sometimes until you've been introduced to that world, you don't know that world exists. And then you get introduced to it and you see that other people with money and power are into this, and well, it's okay, and wow, it's so bizarre, but it's kind of, it's very easy to fall into kind of treachery stuff if you're not grounded too tight. I mean, money, big money and power that come out of nowhere really has a tendency to warp people's mind, I think, sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And that's why what the association is, the connection. Like, for example, I read about Epstein in his younger life before we started recording today, and he was a very dexterous, focused, ambitious young man. I mean, anybody would want their daughter to date a guy like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Based on his credentials and how he... Like, was he a pervert then? And he's like, oh, I'm going to work really hard so that I can, realize these fantasies I'm having? Or did he work really hard, get the money, and then his mind got fucked up?
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, usually...
And I don't just mean him. I mean people in general who are in part of, as you say, that world.
Part of the mystery surrounding him is, and this is why a lot of people think that he's a CIA agent or works for the deep state, is because there's really no evidence of him being able to amass the amount of wealth and money he had. In fact, the one house he has, the one mansion he's got, was given to him by a bazillionaire, signed off free and clear, just gave him the house. He said he was like a money manager or a fund manager, but there's only proof of him ever managing one fund for one wealthy guy. There's no money trail or paper trail of this guy earning the wealth that he had. It just like came out of nowhere. So, was he a deep state operative? There's a lot of people that think there's people in the deep state that are, Satanists and demonic and do horrible things. I mean, it's just so bizarre. It's hard to tell,
Right. But what do you mean by that? That he didn't commit? He was not a pedophile, and that it was just for the media, or?
Oh, no, I don't mean that at all. What I mean is that here you have a guy that's worth billions of dollars. He's a billionaire, I believe, if not hundreds of millions, but a billionaire. And there's no paper trail of how he made any of his money. There's no record of it. There's no tax returns. There's no.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, there's none of that. He's just wealthy. Well, how'd you get wealthy? Did you inherit the money? Did someone give it to you? You say you've been a fund manager.
Yeah, that's what he was. I always thought he was.
But there's no proof of him managing anybody's funds. Just one one big fish client.
Right.
And
So how do you think he got all that money?
I don't know. I mean, if you worked for the deep state or the government, I mean, they give you money. I mean, they give you whatever you want. They just say, okay, you know, the government, the deep state uses the deep state money from all around the world. And, you know, maybe his role was to be like, hey, dude, you know, you're really good at this hooking up girls thing, so here's what we want to do. Mm-hmm. You know, who knows?
So how did these girls get in there? Were they chloroformed, bound and gagged, or were they somehow gradually seduced and tricked into being on board with that? Like they were just, I don't know, runaways or whatever?
From what I can gather, I think it's a combination. Mm-hmm. There are some girls that talked about being like kind of coerced or taken, you know, against their will. Mm-hmm. There's other girls that said that they were like recruited by that lady that was Epstein's close confidant. I can never say her name. Gil. God, I don't know how to pronounce her name.
Okay.
But she's the lady that basically recruited all the girls. Mm-hmm. And they would seek them out and invite them to things and then kind of coerce them. And a couple girls have been, actually more than a couple, have been quite graphic about.
Ghislaine Maxwell?
That's her, Ghislaine Maxwell. Yeah. They've been quite graphic about how, you know, first you just spend a little time with him, and then, you know, next thing you know, okay, well, now you're going to just massage him, and then you massage him, and then he jerks himself off, and then after a few times of that, then he, you know, then he rapes them or, you know, whatever, if they didn't, you know, want it or whatever. So, but then there's been talk about people on the Lolita Express from other countries or people out the island.
The name of the fucking plane is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, come on, the Lolita Express. I mean, it's just, again, I think people really have no concept. Average, everyday, normal people have no concept whatsoever of how extremely wealthy and powerful people think, live, and act. They just don't have a clue. And it's not all prim and proper.
Right. Well, I think that, one of the things, it's just lack of exposure to people like that. I also think that people forget, especially young people, and I'm like, oh, they're rich. And I'm like, you know, they'll look at a person who has, you know, a Chanel bag or you know, Chanel dress and Louis Vuitton bag. Oh, they must be rich. They're not rich.
No, they're not.
That doesn't
rich.
make them rich. And those people might even think they're rich. They have when they buy a bag like that, they're buying a fantasy. Karl Lagerfeld, the late Karl Lagerfeld, who was the creative director at Chanel, he used to talk about that.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
sometimes I didn't always like him. He said some douchey things about people like Adele, but then, you know, he's very astute on other things. And one of them is the concept of wealth. You can look it up on the internet, on YouTube, I should say, where he talks about when he sells, you know, a merely rich person, he's selling them the fantasy that they're fantastically rich.
Yes.
There's a difference.
Big difference.
And the other really huge difference is, even if you make it to that level of wealth, of being fantastically wealthy, you still have the psychology of somebody who is not accustomed to living like that.
Oh,
it's new for you. You can't, you formed your ideas and your identity without those things. Whereas if you know, and I have friends like that because I went to private school growing up, and I have friends that, you know, don't know anything other than having drivers and private jets and you know, just going, you know, to Neiman Marcus whenever they want and buying jewelry and shit on a whim, you know. But yeah, people don't know that those people exist, and they don't know the difference between the range of like super rich and merely rich. Yeah, you know. And the effect that kind of extreme wealth has on the mind.
Oh yeah,
you know.
But I mean, I think a lot of these people are born and bred into that, so it's just how they roll. But
well, not Hillary and Bill. That's one thing about them that you have to notice, is that their problem is not that they are pampered psychopaths. It's that they're ambitious, cutthroat upstarts. in my opinion.
Well, they're also psychopaths. I mean, Bill has been a predatory rapist his whole life.
Even before he
Yes,
was, even
yes.
when he was a young man?
When he was, I don't know if it goes all the way back to when he was a little boy or
No, not little boy, but like when he was in university.
when
for
he
example.
was in Arkansas running for governor, when he was the governor of Arkansas, when he was running for, the presidency. The whole way, there must have been 20 or 30 or 40 different women, almost like Bill Cosby-esque, that would come forward and say that he tried to that he groped them, that he tried to force themselves on them. A couple, I think one or two, said that he flat out raped them against their will, and all of them were squashed. All of them were squashed. And I mean, and then, fast forward, you see, again, Bill Clinton, on this Lolita Express plane, flying with Epstein on this plane.
Doesn't look good for Bill.
Well, he said 4 times, but the White House records of where the president goes says 24 times. There are notes in those records showing that at least 5 or 6 of those times or thereabouts, he ditched his Secret Service agents. Like, oh, the fuck, where the fuck did Bill go? Oh, he's gone.
Well, look
Holy
for every
shit.
strip club.
Yeah, but But think of this. I mean, he is the freaking president of the United States. He is surrounded by the Secret Service, which is not just 7 or 8 guys. It's like 200 people in the military and intelligence.
And there's a few paces ahead of you, behind you, to the right,
I mean,
to the left.
electronically.
Yeah.
I mean, military. So there's a network of people. I've actually watched a documentary on it put on by National Geographic. So for Clinton to say that he was naive to, well, yeah, I knew the guy, he let me use his plane, or I flew with him, but I didn't know he was into that stuff. There's no way with the bubble around the president. I mean, if you or I were to go fly with the president in our plane, the Secret Service would basically put a microscope up our ass to know who we were.
Yeah, for sure.
Before we even got 5 inches from him or 5 feet from him.
Yeah.
So he can't claim ignorance. He was the president with the Secret Service entourage.
Yeah.
Having to know everything and everywhere. So go fuck yourself. But see, most people are ignorant. They don't think about this stuff. They're just like, oh, I like Bill Clinton. He was a cool dude. Oh, he played the saxophone on Saturday Night Live. Oh, it's just... It's the vast right-wing conspiracy.
They'll
That's
say
all it
anything.
is. It's the ongoing, continued, 35-year vast right-wing conspiracy. No, maybe it's just like if you have 30 or 40 women coming forward that say Bill Clinton's a womanizer, borderline rapist, groper, maybe it's really true. I mean, same thing with the whole Epstein thing. And I'm sorry. I mean, I was telling people like 2-3 weeks ago, a month ago, after they finally got him, I was like, this guy is not going to live till trial. They're going to whack his frickin' ass.
Yeah.
They have to. He can implement and even if he doesn't testify, the fact that he's alive means they could get to him. They couldn't allow it to happen. You're talking you're talking Prince Andrew of the royal family.
That is really scary. That's gross. I mean, that made me really feel sorry for those girls and they had to fuck that guy.
Right?
And it's not sex. It's rape. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, and there are powerful men in the world that get off on having some young, beautiful girl tied down, scared to death. It's like primal for them.
But, I mean, so the prince, is he, like, what's going on with that? Is he being investigated or is it just the media saying that? Because that's...
Well, no, I mean, it's evidence. I mean, there's documented evidence that they've traveled together many times and he's been to the island. I mean, it's documented evidence. It's irrefutable, but who's going to investigate him? MI6, the royal family, Scotland Yard, the FBI's not going to, no one's going to investigate these people.
No.
No, I mean, they own the police. They own
Yeah.
the Justice Department.
But it'll be interesting to see how, like, what happens, like, how they're going to respond to these claims, what he's going to say, if anything at all. I really hope he does. Like, dude, why were you hanging out with this on the fucking Lolita Express? What were you doing? And, you know, because that could go really in another direction. If you were able to spread the outrage of that, and it was proven, and you were able to spread the outrage of that, I mean, you could be looking at the overthrowing of the royal family and the end of constitutional monarchy in Great Britain.
Well,
You know,
I mean,
there's a lot of people who want that because, unlike Canadians who are in the Commonwealth, their tax dollars actually have to flip the bill for all that bullshit.
Oh, sure.
And it's not bullshit. I like the Queen. I like her. I think she's, you know, she's a symbol of the history of English-speaking peoples going back to William the Conqueror, and I like all that.
She's O'Reilly, old Laws.
Yeah, and she's.
But she's not British. She's German.
Yeah, that's true.
They stole the throne. They're not even British.
Well, it always works out like that. Stalin was a Georgian; he wasn't Russian,
right.
and Adolf Hitler was Austrian.
But isn't that crazy? I mean, you got the British people with, you know, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years of history. Very proud people. At one time, they owned the frickin' world, basically.
Yeah.
And the frickin' monarchy royalty was hijacked by Germans, and there's no, like, British royal family. They're Germans.
Well, technically, yeah.
They're Germans.
Yeah, but they were all related. I mean, the Tsar, Nicholas II, and you know, King Albert.
How's it going? The Tsar killed the Tsar and his ministers. Anastasia
Asia
screamed in vain.
I rolled a tank, held a generous rank when the Blitzkrieg raged and the fighters stank.
That's a good song.
I love
man.
that song.
It's very apropos.
Yeah, yeah. We need to get the rights for it though before we put it on.
Oh, well.
But
The bots will never get that bad karaoke rendition
Yeah.
that we just
Hey,
did.
I was
so
pretty
we're-
good. At least
well,
remember the words.
you were pretty good. You did have the words.
Well, I got excited when you started singing it. I like
Well,
that song
hey.
too much.
Woo,
Sorry, guys.
woo, woo,
Yeah.
woo.
But back to the Epstein thing, man.
Yeah.
That's fucked up.
They killed him, man. I'm telling you, they killed him.
So when he was found, they said that there were ligature marks on his neck, but he wasn't hanging. He was not like suspended from the ceiling, or was he suspended still?
They haven't said that. There's no, like, but what the autopsy, the initial findings of the autopsy, I believe, came out yesterday. They said that he's got bones in his neck that are broken and crushed.
But that is consistent with hanging.
No, it's not.
I thought it was.
Not crushed. No, your bones don't crush when you hang.
They just get dislocated, right?
Well, it depends how you hang. I mean,
Long drop.
you can't. How are you going to long drop in a
Yeah.
5-6 foot cell? You can't long. And that's the other thing. How are you going to hang yourself? You take a bed sheet, you tie it around your neck, you tie it on the top bunk, and then what are you going to do? Just lean and lean on the floor, like, okay, now I'm hanging from my neck. No, to hang and die.
You cannot reach the floor.
No, and you have to. I mean, the way that they used to hang people is they put them on a platform where the floor would fall out, because you need the weight and momentum for your neck to snap. Because it's if somebody hangs you up by a rope, eventually, 8-10 minutes later, or maybe sooner, you're gonna go to sleep and you're gonna.
Well, that's one way. I think it's not as nice as going to sleep, but
how are you gonna do that by yourself? Like in a. Like I could
without the availability of things, because you're in a cell.
Right, you're in a cell. It's not tall, so the only thing you can
You've got
tie
a patrol for suicide watch.
Well, yeah. But I mean, for your neck bones to break and to be crushed. So somebody murdered the guy and nobody's saying anything. I mean, who knows? I mean, they could have, all the prison guards working there could have been undercover CIA people that knew he was coming, that, they transfer people around. I mean, who knows? It could be a janitor. It could be anything. It could be anything, but there was no way that guy was going to live. And they're not saying any details. They don't know why the cameras weren't running. come on, you're at a prison. Cameras are supposed to be recording all the time, but mysteriously they aren't recording.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nobody checked on him for 2-3 hours. Okay, sure. He gets to the hospital, his neck's broke. Okay. And it's not like, I mean, if you're locked in a cell, it's not like another prison inmate could get to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're locked in the cell.
Mm-hmm.
And he was rooming with the guy, but then they said that the guy he was rooming with got removed, so he was in isolation by himself.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in an isolation cell, typically they don't have like an upper bunk. I mean, typically...
I have no idea. I have no idea what they would look like.
Oh, I've been in them before. I know what they look like.
Why?
I've toured prisons before. And they're cement slabs with a cement slab where the bed is. It's elevated, you know, a couple feet off the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And usually they put a pad on that, and then there's a stainless steel toilet attached to the wall. There's nothing above your head you can tie on to.
Mm-hmm.
So what you could tie yourself to do yourself in, I mean, it's illogical. It's just illogical.
Right.
And especially when you're locked in a room, how is somebody going to get in and kill you unless somebody unlocks the room and lets them in?
And the people who own the facility are in cahoots with the people who don't want you singing.
Absolutely. I mean, who knows? Maybe
Dead birds don't sing. But,
No, they don't.
But he, I still think like it. You don't just need a witness or a confession to get evidence and convict people. I mean, nobody's going to admit to things. They're going to have to go to that house, to that place where all that shit happened, and dust. Like, really dig, look for fingerprints. If there's you know, Bill Clinton's fingerprints there, then. Or pornography, or maybe they filmed this shit that they did with those girls.
Yeah, they have found some of that with Epstein personally. But some people are speculating that a lot of the way that he made his money and the thing that his role, like if he was a deep state person, his role was to entice you with these beautiful women or these young women, if that was your fetish. Basically, if you were a head of state, a head of a business person, a congressperson, a senator, whoever, a movie producer, find out what your fetish is, what your likes are, and then basically hand that to you on a plate. You indulge. They get it all on film, they get everything, and then they blackmail you for money or power or influence. And some people are speculating that that's what Epstein's
How
role
he got
was.
rich.
Yeah, that he was the front man for the deep state that uses that stuff.
Right.
You know, they're even saying that, what's his name from Israel, Netanyahu, has some ties to Epstein. I mean, it's so far-reaching, man. And that goes back to what I say about, you know, Republicans and Democrats here in the U.S., that there is no such thing. At the congressional, Senate, president level, there's no such thing as Republicans and Democrats. It's all a show. The debates, the right, left versus left, it's all a show. These people are all in the same sick fuck cabal at the top.
Interesting. Well, I think that's what when we were talking earlier about the freshman Dems and the deep state Dems.
Yeah.
You know, the more, like, I don't see that AOC, even though we're critical of her here sometimes, because you need to be if you've ever read the Green New Deal. You have to be critical of that if you have to have a brain. But I just don't see her involved with things of that nature.
No, I think what happened...
Or her ambition for getting power in politics, I don't see it as that. I think she's genuine in her own mind.
I think she's genuine, too, and I think she's very, very naive to the way not only the world works, but the way that big politics and big business works. I think she's very naive. She didn't come from that background. So I think what happens is if you manage to get yourself elected and you get up there, in a very short time, you start to see how it really works. And one of two things happen. You either go along with it and You figure, well, I'm going to have a nice life. I'm going to have a lot of influence, a lot of affluence. I'm going to have a lot of opportunities that no one will ever get. I'm going to be, retire wealthy. My family's going to be taken care of. I'm going to be taken care of. Or you try to buck against it a little bit, and you probably get a couple warnings to stop. And if you don't stop, then your own party will do whatever they can to get rid of you, because they only want team players. So I think once you get up there, you can go with the best intentions, but it's very easy to be overwhelmed quickly by all the temptations and money and power and all that stuff. And I think it takes a very, very principled, strong person to be able to go through that and stay the same way.
Right.
And I don't think there's too many of those people left anymore.
They exist, and it's not just in politics. I mean, it's in celebrity culture. I mean, there's a few people that, man, I love them. I love watching them in movies, but then you see their political beliefs, like Emma Watson, Hermione, who, in a way, you almost want to call her Hermione, because all she does, not all she does, she does a lot of good things, and I'm sure she's a very nice person. I have nothing against her on a personal level. But when I saw her do her feminism speech at Brown University, which that's her alma mater as well, and I'm sure she's a very bright girl. She, she carries herself very well, very intelligent. Form A+, content like a C-, man. Like, she was talking about women in the workplace and the gender pay gap that she has no knowledge about and doesn't need to. I mean, she's been surrounded by, not literally like suitcases of cash, but she's been surrounded by wealth and money because she got this big break when she was so young, and she's just never going to know or have to know what the reality is like for most women, what it's like in the workforce. And I'm sympathetic towards that. I'd like to see more women in the workforce. But if women don't want to do that, they shouldn't be forced or compelled. Like, my mother was, she quit her job when she had me. She made a much better mom than she did an office secretary. I shouldn't say that. That's a terrible thing to say. She's probably good at that. But she's a really good mom. And I think that's an underrated thing. I'm also saying that as somebody who, I have friends and family members where the woman is the breadwinner, and the dad is like a stay-at-home dad. He does all the housework, does the cooking, gets the kids off to school, does all the physical stuff around the house, and they're happy. I'm not against that.
Yeah.
It's not common because men, because of testosterone and the difference that testosterone has from estrogen and the way that it affects people's temperament.
Ooh, don't say that around a feminist, man. Don't do it.
Well, I do, and I'm, for any feminist who's listening, I have nothing against you. What's your opinion? I mean, you can write in the comment section and tell me, but testosterone and estrogen are two different chemicals, and they have completely different effects. I'm not saying that you can't go to work. If you want to, you should have the opportunity, but don't shun people who want to stay at home, and because that's a full-time job in and of itself as well.
Aren't those hormone fluids gender fluid? Like, can't you just
gender fluid is a term like
your estrogen? Can't you just will it into?
Well, no. Then you're crazy. That's not feminism. That's craziness. That's like the theory of gravity is nonsense. If I think I float and you think I float, then it happens. It's but that's not real feminism. Those are people just saying that they're feminists, but they're just, again, like Candace Owens says, over-entitled Americans who want to have their cake and eat it and have it every which way that they want. It's, I mean, there's all kinds of things like that, which we talk about, the thin privilege.
Oh, yes, thin privilege.
Which has certain elements of truth. I mean, people who are more attractive tend to be wanted more for jobs. I remember when I used to work in television, having worked before in the auto industry, where not everybody, but it's not like in the entertainment industry. I just found everyone was good looking.
Yeah, everybody.
Not everybody. I mean, the really important, like older people, like their sexy days are over. But
who's ugly? The writers. The writers, the stuntmen,
and a couple of the producers,
the producers, the assistants, the gophers. the best boy.
Well, no, I
the
found
key grip.
Yeah, no, the assistants. There were a lot of good-looking people there. I found, but that's because it's all. Yeah, when I say good-looking, and I'm not Jeffrey Epstein, but like, people in their early 20s.
Oh, okay.
Not in their
see-
early teens like Epstein was into.
See, that's why I like this this camera format we have here, because I'm sexy from here up, but from here down.
Oh, John,
Oh,
don't
Lord.
be like that.
Well, I'm fat shaming myself.
No,
I'm
no,
a self-hating. I'm a self-fat shaming.
No, I know you.
Italian
I know
guy.
you. You don't hate yourself. You don't hate yourself. No one hates you.
Nobody loves me but my mother, and she could be jiving too. That's an old blues song.
Oh, who's that?
B.B. King.
Oh, B.B. King.
Nobody loves me but my mother, and she could be jiving too.
B.B. King.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't say that I'm much of a blues guy, but when it's on, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it live.
Mm-hmm.
I like it live.
That's the
I
only
would
way
never
to
put
see
on
blues.
music like that, but I want it live. I like, Detroit's got a blues scene.
Yeah, it's still got a blues scene flopping around. It's not like it used to be, but it's still pretty good.
What's that music they play in New Orleans? Zydeco?
Yeah,
I think it's called. Is it similar?
Yeah, but it's kind of got more of a Louisiana Caribbean twist to it.
Like a Creole.
Yeah, like a Creole twist to it.
Because I've been thinking about New Orleans lately because I'm trying to learn how to shuck oysters.
Yeah, are you now?
Yeah, have you ever tried that?
I have actually tried it. It's not an easy thing to do until
no.
you learn. Some of these clams and oysters you're trying to shuck are pretty strong, and
Oh yeah.
you bust your knife or bust the shell trying to get them open.
Well, the one thing is the logistics. So, I mean, they sell oysters at my local grocery store, but they just don't look the same way that the oysters that I eat at the restaurant look. They're not. And there's obviously a difference between West Coast and East Coast.
Oh yeah, big difference.
Pacific and Atlantic. I prefer the Atlantic kind.
Yeah, me too.
The New Brunswick,
Yeah.
Nova Scotia.
The West ones are too creamy. It's like biting into a
Yeah.
nasty cream donut.
I agree. I find that too. And I don't eat them. I never eat them cooked. I only eat them raw.
Oh no, I've never had them cooked.
Yeah, like Rockefeller. I've never tried that. But anyway, so I was studying it online. You have to get this chainmail glove for a beginner. That looks like it's from Game of Thrones or whatever. And then you have two knives. They're very thin, very fine. And then you have, like, right at the end where the oyster, comes out, that small point, you have to get it in there, that knife, and then just push it in and then sort of open it. But the way that the amount of pressure that you have to apply when you're putting the knife in is so much that if it slips, which is very likely, it'll only hit the chainmail and you'll just get a bruise rather than lose a finger. But I've been to a place called the Acme Oyster Bar in the French Quarter of New Orleans. And they have people who don't use those chainmail gloves. And they're just shucking. And there's people that they can shuck an oyster as fast as people can eat them, And their hands are all covered up in wounds and slices and
Too bad Epstein didn't have one of those mesh things around his neck.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that's exactly what they. I don't know if it would have helped him.
Yeah, nothing would have helped him.
No, he's screwed. He was screwed from the get-go.
He was the definition of the term "dead man walking."
Yeah. Well, as soon as he was exposed, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're gonna see what happens with that. I would like to not. I don't want to. Sorry, John. I don't want to think that this is just going to blow over. I want to see some people go to jail and get punished for this. But
I think we got a better chance of the Detroit Lions making the playoffs this year. I think we have a better chance of Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi shaking hands and agreeing on legislation with smiles on their faces.
well, they probably do have friendship off camera. I think they all do.
Yeah. You know what they're going to agree on? They're all going to agree on?
What's that?
That's making anything to do with the Epstein investigation top secret and sealed away for 75 years like they did with all the Kennedy documents.
Because that's bipartisan. This like there's right and left people who have skeletons in Epstein's closet.
Yeah,
You know?
that's the whole reason. Like here in Michigan, you know, with the whole, you know, terrible thing that happened in Flint with the drinking water
Right.
and everything. I mean, there was an investigation going on for a couple years, and they had prosecutions going on. They had indictments, and they were getting ready to go to trial. And then we had the governor changed, and we got a new governor, and then that prosecutor, our new attorney general, at the last minute before, you know, everything was about to expire as far as, you know, the time they had to prepare their case, they dismissed everything and said that, you know, oh, we can't move forward because the investigation up to this point was flawed. We're starting from scratch. And now they have to reinvestigate everything when they already had people indicted and standing trial, and they dismissed the charges on everybody, and they're like, oh no, you know, we've got a new, you know, Democratic liberal, you know, lady in there, and she's going to make sure that the Republicans, the dastardly Republicans from before, didn't play, you know, games, and they're not giving special favors to these people and not prosecuting certain ones that are really guilty. And the truth of the matter is, when it comes to Flint, both Republicans and Democrats and Detroit government and the state government all had their hands in it. So all sides want this thing to go away. They don't want it to go to trial, because then it opens the possibility that they could get snagged in it too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, government's just so sleazy and shady.
Well, it's a little bit like in Sweden when, and again, nobody's blaming all immigrants for sordid behavior, but there was a spike after Angela Merkel let the you know, sort of open the floodgate to the Syrian refugees, many of whom needed a safe place to go, and I'm not against them, but there were a lot of people from those within that group of people that you know, were going out and committing rapes. We know that because the rape rate increased. And the women who were raped, they were all talking about, you know, they were describing Syrian guys. And, you know, the media in Sweden, what they did was they started blaming the victim. And the reason is because the government, they know that it's fucked up, but they don't know how to handle it. You know, there's nothing wrong with Syrian people. It's any situation where you have a massive amount of people going into a country and radically changing the dynamic of the, you know, the demographics of that country in a very short space of time. Like, we're talking a couple weeks, you know? So that's the problem. It's nothing against those people. If I was a Syrian, I would really want to go to Germany too, or, you know, Europe as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they don't want to admit it. So they persecute journalists. And like I told you, the government of Sweden didn't want to have gay pride festivals in certain, you know, Islamic refugee neighborhoods, which is unacceptable, because what if there's gay Muslims in there who need to you know, that kind of encouragement? It would help them, but the government doesn't care about them, do they?
The government doesn't care about anybody. Nobody's government cares about them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the nature of government, folks.
Right.
And if you think otherwise, then you're just a little naive and maybe a little too hopeful and daydreaming.
Right. Well, the Ostrich Brigade.
Yes.
You know, they bury their heads in the sand.
They do.
So I just wanted to, before closing today, because we are running out of time, John, I did want to have an update on the discussion we were having with regard to white supremacy, the extent to which it is genuinely a problem in America, and the extent to which it's being hyperbolized in the media, particularly on CNN, and the dangers that runs, the dangers that presents, I should say, not runs. What am I talking about? We had this shooting in Dayton, Ohio on August 4th. The shooter, Connor Bates, killed about 9 people, and he did it in the name of white supremacy. He published a manifesto, not unlike Dylan Roof, in South Carolina, a very racist polemic. And The thing is, it's not that I don't think white supremacy exists, and I think that there are hysterical people who are involved with that. And I've seen on Vice there was for the Charleston, the things that were happening in Charleston. There was a very good, well-done documentary on Vice, and they show those people. They go, they meet them, and you see the mass of people saying, Jews will not replace us. I mean, it's there. It's definitely there, and something needs to be done about it, and even the President of the United States said that. Where are you on this? Do you think that this was a hoax? Because I've heard you say that about public shootings before, that it's a campaign, an initiative to disarm the population of America and take their guns away so that they could do whatever with them. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I do think everything is possible. I don't put it past the powers that be to do stuff like this. I mean, they've done it throughout our history. And there's government documents that have been released that talk about the different programs and different manipulation policies that they've had to accomplish certain things. So I don't know. I mean, it's very hard. I mean, and I'm like a broken record on this.
Well, I asked you the question because I know your perspective on these things. But
it's very, very hard for me to believe that somebody, a kid like that, a younger person like that, gets so far off the rails, to the point that, they're going to not only manifest these violent thoughts and these hateful thoughts, but that they're willing to sacrifice their entire life for basically being angry at something that really maybe in their mind exists, but in the real realm of things, I mean, if you hate a certain person or a certain race of people so bad, why would you want to interact with them? And then the other thing that's just like a big red flag in all these things to me is when there is a manifesto left behind. Mm-hmm. I don't know, you go into prison, take, 1,000 prisoners from around the country that have done very foul things.
But one thing they didn't do is write a manifesto.
Write a manifesto. Basically writing a manifesto confession. I mean, they tried to do that with Lee Harvey Oswald. They said they found these things, and it was all crap. So did this kid in Dayton, was he all invigorated and fired up because his Donald Trump presidency, force for good, or however you want to say it, kind of pushed him over the edge where, because Donald Trump says what he does, it makes it okay for me to go out and do this. It's giving me my, my extra boost of confidence that I'm doing the right thing. I just can't fathom that. Mm-hmm. If there were some other circumstance or, but, again, and then...
Well, there are. I mean, there has been multiple shootings in the last little while, but...
Yeah, but all the shootings, it's always the same MO. Always. It's always some lone kid, usually a kid, sometimes older, but usually, early, late teens, early 20s. It's always some one lone nut, that nobody around them saw any warning signs whatsoever, and they just fly under the radar. And then that one case that was last year, I think.
The Mandalay Bay?
No, not that guy. That guy was older. But again, that whole thing could be a whole nother show and discussion, because the facts surrounding that are so bizarre. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing about these shootings, is that all the facts never come out. There's always bizarre circumstances and unexplainable things. Most of the time the shooter ends up dead, so There's no questioning the shooter.
Like Bin Laden.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, okay, yeah. Same thing. I mean, at a much higher,
Yeah.
level. I mean,
But the story when they said, "Oh, we dumped Bin Laden's body in the ocean in accordance with Islamic tradition,"
yeah. And then,
I never. Heard
and it's
that.
possible Bin Laden might have even been dead before 9/11 even ever happened. I mean, it is at least possible based on what other people, leaders in the world have said, and intelligence agencies in the world have said, and his medical condition and whatnot. So, I don't know. And then so you have this guy that does this in Dayton, and he's got this, white supremacy, quote unquote, there's that buzzword, white supremacist manifesto and hatred. But then you have the guy that shot up the other place in Texas. Well, he's a liberal that followed Elizabeth Warren and was pissed off that the left wasn't left enough. And
Right.
so it's like, okay, so you got whack jobs on both sides. Or are these plants that have been somehow either coerced into doing this or have been programmed into doing this? I don't know.
By the way, I don't think that we are actually officially saying that we think that these are hoaxes.
No, absolutely not.
We're just explaining that there would be an opportunity, there would be people who stand to gain something from creating a hoax.
Sure there would.
That's all we're saying. We're putting it on the table because I remember when Alex Jones got in a lot of trouble for saying Sandy Hook was a hoax.
Yeah.
And then what they did was they got the parents of the victims, and they they went on and they wanted to have his show taken off of YouTube, which I think it was.
Yeah, it was. That's what they got him on, and what Alex was doing was terrible, and I'm in no way, shape, or form saying that it was. I'm just saying that if it was, I wouldn't be surprised. And, the circumstances surrounding most of the shootings, not all of them, but most of them, when you dig into them, they're bizarre, and things are done out of protocol with the law enforcement, with the agencies handling it. There's no confirmation of, certain facts. There's no rhyme or reason. Like, none of these people, I mean, this kid supposedly left this manifesto, but, there's no, most of the time there's nothing. Like I said, people that know these people well can't fathom, like the guy in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
His brother was dumbfounded. Like, he was so in shock. Like, he knows his brother. He's close with his brother, and he has no inkling, and his brother does this, and it's like, none of this makes sense. It was like the guy in out east that he was like a 58-year-old plumber. He's the guy that went down and shot the Republican, Congress people at the charity softball game.
Okay.
He's got grandkids. He looks like someone's grandpa, about to retire. No history of mental illness, no history of violence or whatever. First of all, how he even found out about the charity, this is like a low-key, local charity softball thing just outside Washington that how would anybody 12, 14 hours away in another state even know about? So how did he know what was going on? And then he's just going to get in his van, his work van, drive 12, 14 hours, however long it was, down there, straight down there, and just ambush these guys with no warning, knowing full well that he could get killed, which I believe he did. And then you're never going to see your grandkids again. Your wife. You're walking away from your life to kill a couple Republicans.
Yeah.
But
I think there's people who would do it.
I don't.
I think there's people who are crazy enough to do it, like Dylan Roof in South Carolina.
I do believe that. I mean, yeah, I believe there's people crazy enough. I don't believe there's a guy like him that's crazy enough.
Like the guy who we were talking about who killed the Republicans.
Yeah, he shot. I don't think he killed any of them. He maimed them. I think he ended up getting killed.
Okay.
But yeah, that doesn't make sense. You can't. There's no explanation. There's no mental illness. There's nothing. There was nothing in his life. There's no manifesto. I mean, maybe he was a left-wing guy that was bent out of shape about politics. But I mean, grandpas love their grandkids. You mean to tell me you're going to leave your grandkids? You're going to leave your wife? You're going to leave your kids, your family on a whim? Because and sacrifice the rest of your life just to go like shoot a couple guys you don't even know based on politics and what you see on TV? I don't believe it. I just don't believe it.
That's interesting, John. I think it's an interesting point of conversation, but I also understand that there's people who I think that both are options. Both could actually be going on. And the reason we're having this conversation for the people at home so they understand is that we want you to have an open mind and know that almost everything is possible.
Yeah.
And to be critical of what you read in the media, and hear in the media, even though it might be on a prominent news station or have a very emotional connotation to it. In the case of these school shootings, because remember, one of the things that I think that I worry about, and that's the reason I'm entertaining this conversation with you, even though I'm not 100% sold on it myself. I just think that people need to get talking about it and thinking about these things.
I don't know. I had a very interesting and good teacher when I was in 5th or 6th grade, or 7th grade, somewhere in that. He was a science teacher, but he was he thought thoughts out of season. He was a very interesting, like, crazy, quirky guy. And he always used to say, just because you see it on TV or just because you read it in a newspaper doesn't make it true.
Right.
Just because, at the time, Walter Cronkite, just because Walter Cronkite looks you in the eyes and says something to you sternly, like a well-seasoned older, grandpa figure, doesn't make it true. And he used to also say, when all else fails, think before you flip out or you react to something. And unfortunately, I think with the advent of the, sensationalized 24-hour news cycle, it's just, you get a flash, you get a headline, you get a quick little snippet of some video, and you're just like, holy shit, it's true, without doing any, okay, let's treat this like an open police investigation. What are the facts?
Right, and don't succumb to moral pressure.
No. Nope.
So, to be continued, John and friends at home, the issue of white supremacy is something that I want to keep talking about because I think that it exists. I think there's problems with it, but I also worry that it's being sensationalized in the media, and that is dangerous. Hey, friends at home, thanks for joining us here on The Big Flush. This has been Zach Marentet, my friend John Enot, and we'll see you next week.
We will see you next week. Have a good week.